this girl has. It's unbelievable. Listen, everybody.
Only one person.
Listen, everybody. Today is one day after, but today is 1954 for our destruction of the temple.
Wow.
We are going to fulfill a mitzvah today and not greet you of a good day or good morning, because this day is Tisha B'Av. We start prayers with Birkot HaShachar on page 27, and also there is one blessing that we are going to skip in this day. And also we are going to daven in a low kind of key.
No tefillin, no talit.
No tefillin, no talit. I wear black. Please rise. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לשכל ובינה להבחין בין יום ולילה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שלא עשני גוי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שלא עשני עבד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם ששני בצלמו. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם פוקח עיוורים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם מלביש ערומים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם מתיר אסורים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם זוכף כפופים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם רוקע הארץ על המים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשה לי כל צורכי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם עוזר ישראל בגבורה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם עוטר ישראל בתפארה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם הנותן ליעף כוח. ותננו היום ובכל יום לכנו לחסד ולרחמים בעיניך ובעיני כל רואינו, ותגמלנו חסדים טובים. ברוך אתה אדוני גומל חסדים טובים לעמו ישראל. רבי ישמעאל אומר, ב13 מידות התורה נדרשת, מקל וחומר. וכן שני כתובים המכחישים זה את זה, עד שיבוא הכתוב השלישי ויכריע ביניהם. יהי רצון מלפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שיבנה בית המקדש במהרה בימינו, ותן חלקנו בתורתך, ושם נעבודך ביראה כי מעולם וכשנים קדמוניות.
Page 57, Kaddish Rabbana.
יקדש בן רבה, ועלמא דברה חירותי ויבליך מלכותי, וחי יכול ויום יכול וחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויבוא עמנו. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה, יתברך ויתקבח ויתפאר ויתפורר ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי קדושה וליכוד, לעילם ינקול ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, אמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. עם ישראל ורחמנן ויחכימון, ויעל כל תלמידי הון, ויעל כל מועצת קים ברכה, יברכה הלב ודין וכל אתר ואתר, יהא נתן וכאן שלום רבה. הנה וחסדה ורחמי וחיי ערכי ומלא זכריקי, ותקנה ויקדה נגרון ובישריה ויבוא אמן. יהא שלום רבה מצ'מיה, חיים טובים עלינו ויעקב ישראל ויבוא אמן. זועק שלום במרמה, ויעשה ורחמת שלום עלינו ויעקב ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
מזמור שיר חנוכת הבית לדוד. אבל ממך אדוני כי דליתני ולא שימחת אויבי לי. הפכת מספדי למחול לי, פיתחת שקי ותעזרני שמחה, למען יזמרך כבוד ולא ידום. אדוני אלוהי לעולם אודקה.
קדש.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמך רבה, ועלמא דברה חירותי ויאריך מלכותי, וחי יכול וליום יכול וחיי לכל בית ישראל, ועד עליו בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמך רבה מבורך, יעלם ולעולם היה, ויתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה, שווה תקודשה וריקוד, נעלם מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ולחמתה, תאמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה משמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום יאמר, ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
Please rise, page 63.
ברוך שאמר והיה העולם, ברוך הוא, ברוך עושה בראשית, ברוך אומר ועושה. יחיד חי העולמים, מלך משובח ומפואר עדי עד שמו הגדול, ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל בתשבחות. הודו לאדוני.
Last two lines, page 65.
הודו לאדוני קראו בשמו, הודיעו בעמים, עלילותיו שירו לו. כי כל אלוהי העמים אלילים, ואדוני שמיים עשה. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להדום רגליו קדוש הוא. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו, כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו. אדוני צבאות העמנו משגב לנו אלוהי יעקב סלע. אדוני צבאות אשרי אדם בוטח בך. אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ויום קוראנו. הושיע את עמך. ואני בחסדך פתחתי, יגל ליבי בישועתך, אשירה לאדוני כי גמל עלי. יהי כבוד טוב אדוני לעולם חסדו לדור ודור אמונתו, יהי כבוד אדוני לעולם אשמחים. והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, ויהי רבה להשיב אפו ולא יעיר כל חמתו. אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ויום קוראנו, אשרי יושבי ביתך.
73.
עוד לא חסר. שככה. תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו, יברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד. ואנחנו נברך יח מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה. הללויה, הללי נפשי את אדוני. אל תפתחו בנתיבים. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. הללויה. שבחי ירושלים. מגיד דבריו ליעקב, חוקיו ומשפטיו לישראל. לא עש לכן לכל גוי ומשפטים בל ידעום. הללויה. הללויה.
Page 77.
יהללו את שם אדוני כי נשגב שמו לבדו, הודו על ארץ ושמיים, וירם קרן לעמו. תהילה לכל חסידיו, לבני ישראל עם קרובו, הללויה. הללויה. שירו לאדוני. לאסור מלכיהם בזיקים ונכבדיהם בחבלי ברזל, לעשות בהם משפט כתוב, הדר הוא לכל חסידיו, הללויה. הללויה. אל בקודשו. כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה. כל הנשמה תהלליה, הללויה. ברוך אדוני לעולם, אמן
79,
ואמן.
please rise.
וברוך שם כבודו לעולם וימלא כבודו את כל הארץ, אמן ואמן. ויברך דוד את אדוני. אתה הוא אדוני האלוהים אשר בחרת באברהם והוצאתו מאור כסדים ושמת שמו אברהם, ומצאת את לבבו נאמן לפניך וחרות מעלות. והים בקעת לפניהם ויעברו בתוך הים ביבשה, את רודפיהם השלכת במצולות כמו אבן במים עזים ביבשה. וירא ישראל את היד הגדולה אשר עשה אדוני במצרים, ויראו העם את אדוני, ויאמינו באדוני ובמשה עבדו. אז יש משה עבדו. תאומות יחסיון. כי לאדוני המלוכה ומושל בגויים, ועלו מושיעים בהר ציון, לשפוט את הר עשיו. והייתה לאדוני המלוכה, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. היי למעלה. ברכות והודעות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני. אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודעות, אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך חי עולמים.
We turn to page 89, the bottom paragraph. See there?
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. המאיר לעזו אדוני ברחמים.
Page 91.
כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים. וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובטהרה, בשירה ובזמרה ומברכים, משבחים ופארים ומעריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול. וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ובנעימה, קדושה. כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה.
קדוש, קדוש,
קדוש, קדוש, קדוש אדוני צבאות מלוך על הארץ כבודו, והאופנים וחיות הקודש. ברעש גדול מתנשאים לעומת השרפים, לעומתם משבחים ואומרים.
כבוד אדוני
כבוד אדוני מקומו לאל ברוך נמות ייתנו למלך.
Page
תראו לבד.
95, halfway down the page.
אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות. העבר הבא הפתענו עליו. נאר עינינו בתורתך. כי אל פועל ישועות אתה, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת להודות לך ולכתך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני בוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
Page 99.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לעוס על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. והיה לאהבה. ישמרו לכם. וחרם. ושמתם את דברי לעד. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם ונתנו על ציצית הכנף וטיל תכלת. והיה לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תצורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת ויציב. נכון.
Page 103.
על אבותינו ועלינו, על בנינו ועל דורותינו ועל כל דורות, זרע ישראל עבדיך. מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, פודנו ומצילנו מעולם שמך. אין אלוהים זולתך. עזרת אבותינו אתה ומעולם, מרנו משה עליהם ולבניהם אחריהם בכל דבר דור. ועונה לאמור בעת שב לעם אליו. תהילות לאל עליון ברוך הוא ומבורך משה ובני ישראל. הכנו שיר בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נהדר בחודש נורא תהילות אוספנה. שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים משמך על שפת הים. יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופדה חינאומך יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני על ישראל.
Page 109. The Amida is said silently to page 135.
אלינו אבינו ענן ביום צום התענית הזה.
Okay, so no talking because it's Tisha B'Av. We don't have a million, so no Torah service. So I think what we do next, you'll have to take the lead here. We do the keynote. Begins on page 91. What Rabbi Bright used to do is he would select certain keynote to do, but I don't know exactly which
Okay.
ones.
Okay.
So
So right now it's keynote.
whatever, it's what you want to do.
We're not going to bother the public a lot.
So what we're going to be doing now, we're going to be turning to the keynote in the volumes that we have here. It's going to begin on page 91, and we will follow the lead of the Chazan.
Page, sir?
Page 91.
90.
Page 91 in the Tisha B'Av Compendium to Tefillah and Keynote.
So Paula, do you want to help us, please? We're going to read the 91. Please come close to the green microphone here. You don't have to raise your voice. It's just to read the English. We are going to read the English of the Kina on page 91. Paula, please.
The joy of my heart ceased when those who troubled me caused me to hear, depart from me. They made me a scum and refuse among the flocks of my companions. Thou hast screened the dwelling place as with a cloud, so as not to attend my prayers. Thou hast enveloped thyself in anger, and my hearers were overwhelmed. They clapped their hands, and my limbs tottered when he floated my mighty men. Even though the city has fallen, storm-beaten in the nethermost depths, my eye yet awaits the coming of the vision of the son of Berachia, which is concealed until miracles of Gilgal are wrought again. My eye grieves, though being crippled by Greece. God brought it about, yet he repented and called for weeping, saying, for these things do I weep. When her foundations were raised and her pious ones were crushed at Euphrates, she called the division of the Red Sea. The terror of the sin of Shiloh overtook her counsels when the barbarians shouted, where are her saints? Zion wrung her hands in sorrow when they exposed the cherubim to those who were impure. Upon Mount Zion, the multitudes of my enemies lay in wait. My insolent foes engulfed me, and my contemptors cut me off to make me a halt at Nob. Thou didst watch my sin to stir up my enemies. My people cried in the days of Ben-Dinah, he the Lord is righteous.
Bless you. We're going to turn to page 92. Michael, can you help me, Michael? Most of the keynote, most of the Lamentations, wrote a wonderful poet by Elazar HaKalir. You're going to see Kalir upstairs. A genius that wrote many of those Lamentations. The book is full of him. And he's lament and wrote poetry about the events that what happened then. On page 102, he is weeping on the death of Yoshiyahu. Yoshiyahu was an 8-year-old child, and he was the last of the kings. He opened the book once in the Beit HaMikdash. It was already like they did their horrible things. And he opened in the book in the Parashat Tochechot in Bechukotai. And he read all those things, and he took action, and he eliminates all the statues, and he returned and he is the one who hid the ark. And now this is a lamentation for crying over Yoshiyahu, over this king, by Jeremiah. Jeremiah, of course, the prophet, 17-year-old, which we read the book of Eicha, he wrote it, the prophet that prophesies the destruction of the temple. Page 102, the English, of course.
Okay. Take up the lament of Asha for one of the mighty kings of the land. When he was but 8 years old, he began to seek God of his own accord, yet his noble deeds were not recalled in his favor when the sons of Ham besieged him. Indeed, among all the kings of Israel who arose to take measures against false worship, none has ever arisen like him since the time of Avigdor. Yet the guilt of the scornful ones of that generation cleaved to him, when they set up idolatrous symbols behind the doors and posts. Those who ate the seed nurtured by the Nile did make his golden hue more black than charcoal. God withdrew his right hand as iniquity increased, but he has not yet withdrawn his hand from the decree. His words rang clear when he bade them fulfill the laws and carried out his threat. Cursed be he that keeps it not. His brow darkened when those that stood aloof from the Torah outraged him by compromising with those that rejected the law and the statutes. They were hailed as good neighbors when Pharaoh Necho sent ambassadors, saying, "What quarrel is there between us to cause you hardship this day? You will only fill the hands of the people of the land with blood. You will be punished if you stop me from accomplishing the will of your God." He withheld his troops from marching to Aram Neharim in order that no single sword should pass through Ephraim. He did not hearken to the prophet to turn back, for it was decreed that Egyptian be set against Egyptian. Because of the guilt of concealing idols behind the doorposts, they began to scorn the warning of the prophet from Anahoth. For Anamites came to condemn his personage, yet Josiah did not flinch from facing Necho, and so had they cause to bewail him. "Retreat," they bade him, "retreat before ruin overwhelms you." But he refused to withdraw. The earthly pillar fell when he drew nigh to the battle, and no prayers helped King Josiah when the archers shot at him. Even while death closed his eyes, his assailants continued to shoot arrow after arrow, wounding his body and pressing him hard. They hunted him down, making him a target for the archery practice, and shot 300 arrows at him. The dishonored ones bent over him to catch the last utterings of his mouth, as his breath forced itself in gasps from his mouth. "Righteous is the Lord, for it is I who rebelled against his word." And his deeds praised him till the very moment his soul took leave of him. "Rejoice, O Noph, for God's wrath is jealous to repay Israel's destruction, incurred by the iniquity of their extortion. The golden leader of the people is gone because of their guilt, and everyone lamented over him, saying, "How dim the gold has become." The perfect one met with the same fate when he had to drink the cup of death at the valley of Megiddo. It was the season of the sabbatical year when the time had come for the congregation to assemble. God postponed the complete destruction of the temple by 22 years because they eulogized Josiah with the poem of Echa, containing the 22 letters of the alphabet. My dancing was changed to signs of lamentation at the time when I forgot my Creator. I thought that he will forever form a shelter over me. Yet when I acted wickedly, I was plucked up, and my tent is forsaken.
The next kina, Shanan, can you help me, Shanan? The next kina is talking about the tent, Aholi, on page 104. The tent, which means the tabernacle, the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, which was so holy that some people could go until a certain kind of place, and from this space will be only this kind of level person, and from this place is going to be the priests, and then beyond that it's holy and holy, and how it was like now it's all impure and everybody can go, and it become like a plowed field. So this is the lamentation about the tent on page 104, please.
I mourn for my temple, which thou didst desire to conjoin in alignment with the throne of glory, even from before creation. Why is it forever devastated by robbers, whilst thou hast become a wandering shepherd, and dost storm in anger and complain? What task now keeps me here? My temple, which thou didst establish for my mighty fathers of old, who in a tremor asked, who is it that will destroy it? Why is it cut off forever by the adversaries, whilst thou hast become like a solitary bird upon a roof, lamenting bitterly? What has my beloved to do here? My temple, for whose sake thou didst speak to Moses, go and say to them, return to your tents. But you stand by me. Why is it forever raised by Gentiles, whilst thou hast become like an enemy and adversary? Indeed, where is thy assurance that the desire of thy habitation is here in Zion? My tent of meeting, which thou didst lead within clouds of glory, for the sake of those who are present and for those who are not, why is it forever rejected by the rebels? Whilst thou hast become powerless to help, when the ungodly exclaimed, what have you here, and whom have you here? My temple which thou didst establish for thy residence, to overshadow it for its protection, as by a canopy. Why is it swept away by arrogant ones, whilst thou hast become like a bird, hovering lonely in space, and there is no more a prophet to guide us? For thou hast said, no prophet shall be here any more. My temple, in the chambers of which thou didst lodge on either side, why is it forever rejected by strangers, whilst thou hast become like a strong man who runs away and is unable to cross back? My temple wherein thou didst ordain the casting of lots in thy presence, why is it forever thrust into the hands of the Edomites, whilst thou hast become like an alien in the land, and didst say to them, that thou wilt not return until they come back here? My temple, whose brightness was like the morning stars, darkened because of the iniquity of my extortion, why are we forever obscured by the other nations, whilst thou hast become as a wayfarer in night quarters, who must needs complain? Who else have you here, east and west, in all quarters, and in every generation? God's wrath and his protection are well known. Why then has he laid his hand upon me more than any other nation? This is clear. The reason is that disaster was engraved on the palm of his hand. However, my remedy is assured, for his anger is but for a moment, and yet how the Lord in his anger brought darkness upon me.
God bless you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Chaim
Thank
is
you.
going to help us with the next kina. Kina means to lament.
105?
On 111. And the rabbis tell us that we have to worship the Lord sometimes with chutzpah, with nerve, with urge, with stubbornness, and to turn to Him and to say to Him, how could you do that and that and that and that? God loves that, and because we want to confront Him, we don't want to be like, okay, so this, okay, no, we're rejecting we are the people of Israel, we are your children, we remind you, and this is what the next lament is about. Remember what happened here. Remember that we are your children. Again, by this Elazar Kalir, and if you notice in the alphabet, in the Hebrew side, you're going to see that every sentence starts. You see there's a bold. The second word is according to the words of the letters of the alphabet. Also, the alphabet will remind him the 22 letters of creation, and we demand and remind him that he's our Father. Please.
Remember what the enemy has done in the temple. He drew his sword and entered the very innermost sanctuary. He terrified our inheritance when he defiled the shewbread and pierced the curtain of the ark with a two-edged sword. He befouled the orphans with red with blood-reddened shield, and measured them out for death with a line of reddish hue. He made our waters muddy, and made his arrows drunk with blood, and his sword was full of blood when he came out of the temple. We lament for his scheming the destruction of man, and stretching out forth his hand in defiance against God himself, who conquered Egypt and all the nations therein. And for the musing, I will advance against him, making an assault in the midst of his beloved temple. When in the days of our forefathers the two young men brought strange fire into the tent, and fire consumed them. But this Titus brought in a conceited harlot, yet was not singed by it. The foeman's slaves raked the flame of the fire in his temple. And wherefore did he send fire from the heaven on the house of fire, where the perpetual flame had shone? We sunk in despair to our very necks, as he took away the sacred vessels of the temple, and loaded them on to the galleys, to use them for serving. We shuddered when the priest rose in the morning and did not find the full tally of 93 sacred vessels. The women became terror-stricken when they saw how the tyrant violated with his loot the sacred soil of the temple. The nobles writhed in sudden fear when the shameless victor spawned unsavoriness on entering the Holy of Holies. The young men stood outside, resolved to restrain themselves, and were convinced that he would be injured by a myriad of demons. But the elders trembled when permission was given to him from the heaven above to execute his will, and God himself, as it were, bound helpless in chains. With an accusing adversary gone, the Romans followed. He encircled the wall of Jerusalem and wrought havoc among the multitudes of our people. God's anger fell upon the descendants of Jacob, who peeled rods of fresh poplar, almond, and chestnut tree, until the palace was forsaken from the heavens. Before he began to enter the gateway of the Temple Mount, he planned its destruction by his 4 chief marshals. The western wall was left as a memorial, and although the divine presence remained standing beyond our wall, yet he did not plead his own cause. But he became angry, and he gave permission to clear out all the holy vestals. Innocent youths were removed from there. Oh, why did the nations rage? Whereas thou hast this not turn to the offering and prayer, and didst send them to the land of Uz in 3 boatloads. Cause us to return, they cried, when they came toward the fountains of the deep. And they made compact together to fall into the sea, singing songs and praises to Moses, as Moses did at the Red Sea. For thy sake we are killed in the depths of the sea. To their supreme being they implored, even while surrounded by the floods up to their necks. And although all this had come upon us, nevertheless we have not forsaken thee. They placed their hopes in him who promised to bring them back from Bashan. And a heavenly voice was heard saying, Awake, why sleepest thou, O Lord?
Yaakov, can you please, no, Mark, can you help me please? The next lament is going to be on 120. The prophet there is describing the most horrible things that happens in this time, things that are the mind cannot even bear thinking. So we are going to respond to Mark. Mark is going to read a sentence, and we are going to respond to him. Woe is me, Alelaili in Hebrew. Horrible, horrible, horrible what happened to the people of Israel. 120 responsive, it's not responsive, but we are answering Mark.
When I think how women could devour their own offspring, the children of their tender care.
Woe is me.
When I think how compassionate women could boil their own children that were so carefully nurtured.
Woe is me.
When I think how the tresses of their head could be cut off and tied as adornment upon the enemy's fleet horses.
Woe is me.
When I think how the tongue of the suckling could cleave to his palate through parching thirst.
Woe is me.
When I think how one woman could moan to another, "Come, let us boil our shrieking children."
Woe is me.
When I think how one woman could make assignment with another and say, "Give me your son for food," but that he was already hidden away, having been cut into pieces.
Woe is me.
When I think how the flesh of fathers were prepared as food for their children in caves and ditches.
Woe is me.
When I think how the daughters were clasped swollen from starvation in their mother's lap.
Woe is me.
When I think how the spirit of dead infants hovered over their swollen corpses that lie about the streets of the city.
Woe is me.
When I think how the women were burdened with miscarrying wounds and dried up breasts, and each mother weeps over her children that are sinking to death.
Woe is me.
When I think how 800 armor bearers having been soured in the sweat of Arabia, fell in the desert.
Woe is me.
When I think how their breath became a flame through eating salty food, and been given to drink from the empty, distended skin bottles.
Woe is me.
When I think how in exhaustion 1,000 were diminished to 100, 100 to 10, and 10 to 1.
Woe is me.
When I think how 80,000 young priests fled to the temple's protective veil for shelter. When I think how all those souls were burnt like the loppings of thorn bushes.
Woe is me.
When I think how the necks of 80,000 anointed young priests were broken, falsely accused of shedding Zachariah's innocent blood.
Woe is me.
When I think how the wounded became swollen from the odor of the produce of the grass.
Woe is me.
When I think how 9 cabs of children's brains were piled up on one stone.
Woe is me.
When I think how 300 sucklings were impaled, stretched out on a single branch.
Woe is me.
When I think how tender and delicate women were seen walking in fetters at the hand of the chief executioner.
Woe is me.
When I think how the daughters of noble princes were dishonored among the rubbish heaps in the fields.
Woe is me.
When I think how the young men and maidens fainted through parching thirst.
Woe is me.
For all this, the Holy One thunders his anger, exclaiming, "Woe to all my bad neighbors! They announce the fate which they brought upon Israel, but what they themselves committed they do not announce. When women are forced into eating their own offspring, they proclaim the scandal, but when they themselves slay a priest and a prophet in the sanctuary of the Lord, they do not publish it."
Shkoch. Me myself, years ago, when I was a cantor here in Montreal, I was teaching my son to ride the bicycle in a kind of a street. We were really on Circle Road. One of the streets there is quiet, and then come out a woman, an old woman, a Montreal, Quebec woman, and she said, "What are you doing here?" So I said to her, "What do you mean? What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm teaching my son to drive the bicycle." "What are you doing here?" "Go back to your own country." That I will never forget. And I have a friend in the synagogue, he came from Hungary, in Israel. He has a black belt and a Dan Stein, two Dan in karate. That's because the kids there were hitting him when he was a child. Karate kids. So he had to defend himself. This all happened, and we have to remember in this day. We are turning to page 144. And please, Paula, can you help me, please? And again, this is a responsive. Paula will read a sentence, and congregation will read the second half of the. Again, it's talking about exiting Egypt and become a nation with so much pride and hero-ness, and then the opposite of what happened to us when we lost it. 144 in the English side, of course, a fire.
A fire of joy is kindled within me as I think of the time
When I depart from
Egypt. But I will raise my own lamentations as I recall the time
When I departed from Jerusalem.
Then Moses sang a song of unforgettable
When I
when I
departed from Egypt.
But Jeremiah mourned and wailed with bitter lamentation when I departed from Jerusalem. My house was established, and the cloud abode thereon. when I departed from Egypt. But the wrath of God lay upon me like a dark cloud when I departed from Jerusalem. The waves of the sea roared and piled themselves up like walls when I departed from Egypt. But the proud waters overwhelmed and flowed over my head when I departed from Jerusalem. Food fell from heaven, and the rock gushed forth water when I parted from Egypt. But there was wormwood, gall, and water of bitterness when I departed from Jerusalem. Round about Mount Horeb I exulted morning and evening when I departed from Egypt. But I was summoned to mourning at the rivers of Babylon when I departed from Jerusalem. The appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire when I departed from Egypt. But there was a whetted sword drawn for the slaughter when I departed from Jerusalem. Sacrifices, meal offerings, and anointing oil I offered when I departed from Egypt. But God's chosen people were taken like sheep to the slaughter when I departed from Jerusalem. Sabbaths and festivals I enjoyed, signs and wonders I did witness when I departed from Egypt. But fasting, mourning, and the pursuit of vanity were my lot when I departed from Jerusalem. The fair pitched tents were divided into 4 banners when I departed from Egypt. But naught was there except the camps of the heathens when I departed from Jerusalem. We instituted the Jubilee year and sabbatical years, and the land was laid at rest when I departed from Egypt. But I was sold in perpetuity, cut down and crushed when I departed from Jerusalem. Shalom? There's more? Another page? Okay. The mercy seat, the ark, and the stones of memorial welcomed me when I departed from Egypt. But sling stones and destructive weapons assailed me when I departed from Jerusalem. The Levites, Aaron's priests, and the 70 elders were with me when I departed from Egypt. But taskmasters, suppressors, and slave dealers encountered me when I departed from Jerusalem. Moses was our shepherd and Aaron our leader, but Nebuchadnezzar the prince and Hadrian the emperor when I departed from Jerusalem. We would form a line of battle, and the Lord would be there when I departed from Egypt. But he was far away from us, and behold, he was not there when I departed from Jerusalem. The secret place behind the veil and the order of shew bread were revealed to me when I parted from Egypt. But wrath was poured out on me, covering me like a thicket when I departed from Jerusalem. I beheld burnt offerings, sacrifices, and offerings made by fire of sweet savor when I departed from Egypt. But Zion's precious children were pierced with the sword in the streets when I departed from Jerusalem. The priest's ceremonial caps were appointed to be worn for their glory when I departed from Egypt. But hissing, shouting, and tumultuous noise and quaking followed me when I departed from Jerusalem. The high priest's plate of gold, dominion, and power were conferred upon me when I departed from Egypt. But the crown was cast down and help had clean gone when I departed from Jerusalem. Sanctification, prophecy, and the glory of the Lord were revealed when I departed from Egypt. But pollution, fear, and the spirit of defilement when I departed from Jerusalem. The singing cry of victory and the fanfare of trumpets I heard when I departed from Egypt. But wailing of infants and groans of the wounded when I departed from Jerusalem. The table, the candlestick, whole burnt offerings, and incense were established when I departed from Egypt. But idols, abominations, graven images, and heathen pillars when I departed from Jerusalem. The Torah, the testimony, and the order of the temple service were taught to me when I departed from Egypt. May I obtain gladness and joy, and let sorrow and sighing flee away
when I return to Jerusalem. As it's an alphabetic, so I could not. And 2 more keynote, with your permission, 2 more. One is Lamentation. As you see, we read Lamentations from the 7th century by Akalir. There's others by Rabbi Yehuda Levi, 10th century. And we are now during history, few more lamentations added to the poor repertoire of our wonderful nation. One of them is for the Holocaust on page 173. Michael, can you help me, please? You ready? So we can do responsive reading. 3 lines Michael will read, and we are going to read the next 3 lines. It talks about our 6 million brothers and sisters that were perished in the Holocaust. 173. Thank you very much.
O how thou hast cast down our glory from our head, O how thou hast hidden thy face from us, O how thou wast angry and had no pity.
When a
Broken and
broken
contrite heart, the day of fasting and convocation, we come before thee in lamentation. We call the murderers from 1974. Thou hast crushed the pride of Jacob, whom thou didst love. Thou hast cut off the lofty of stature and degraded the tall ones. Thou hast laid waste our vines and blighted our fig leaves. Our bones cleave to our skin and to our flesh. Thou hast utterly crushed our life to the ground. Our soul melts away from sorrow and sighing. The pleasant and the beloved, the upright and the perfect ones, were loaded onto the wagons like sheep and cattle. The heat was suffocating, and the doors were sealed. Distinguished scholars sit on the ground in stunned silence. What, oh, what was their guilt, they ask? Why was the decree issued without mercy? Remember well the cry of the humble, the cry of the orphans bereaved and forsaken, the derision of the scholars and their beloved disciples.
Heads of families, mighty men of our
Disgrace and horror for the nation. Those whom we dandled and reared, the tyrant utterly consumed, like wolves tearing the prey, ravening to shed their blood. 6 million massacred, who could imagine? They went down alive into the netherworld, saying, Shema Yisrael, and singing, Ya'alelu. Their souls departed while they were wrapped in talit and tefillin. Let the murderers be put to shame and confusion and be as naught. Our flesh and our hearts fail at the destruction of our portion. All of us raise lamentation for the destruction of half of our nation. For the European Holocaust ranks equal to the destruction of our temple. To Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Medmenich, and Treblinka were they taken in disgrace, thrust into the gas chambers, and burnt in the furnaces. Yet in the Warsaw Ghetto, the holy martyrs fought and fell like warriors. From every corner their congealed blood cries out, Oh, when will the end come to the severe afflictions? Take up bitter lamentation and wailing for the holy martyrs. The blasphemers contemned the covenant of Abraham and our law. Those who reviled thee fell upon us. When we made our soul mourn with fasting, the crown has fallen from our head. Woe to our heritage. Scrolls of the law they cut into shreds and defiled them with their hands. They flayed the flesh of our kinfolk and used their skin for their own adornment. Lament, gird on sackcloth, and wail for them and for their children. Our eyes shed tears of blood for the burning of synagogues, for the destruction of yeshivot and academies. They destroyed our assemblies and demolished our congregations. Fear came upon us and trembling seized us. In our distress, confusion has covered our faces. Want and hunger, they gnawed the dry ground. The virtuous women took their own lives. Noise their crying is heard as far as the Red Sea. Our kinfolk and dearly loved friends, pious and upright, holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament, receive and shelter them forevermore under the cover of thy wings. Merciful One, remember in thy mercy the remnants of thy heritage, Sovereign of the universe, remove anxiety and grief from thy people, uproot in thy wrath the wickedness of the nations and the enemies of Israel. Proclaim liberty to the captives and release our prisoners. Crown us with the oil of joy in place of mourning. Grant peace and tranquility to us and to our land. Use our power and hasten our redemption speedily in our days. Let desert shall rejoice, and let Israel our state blossom like a rose. O bless us with the blessing of God, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our patriarchs.
Good. So as we see, it's like alphabet kind of order, and in the end there is a kind of a light of hope and a demand to not to give up, of course, for a blessing. The last kina that we are going to sing or to talk about is called Eli Tzion Ve'are on 176. This is the melody. If you heard me singing the Adon Olam yesterday, the Lecha Dodi, and last week also, and this is by the tune of this lament. It's a very known lament, and we're going to say it in English. Shannon, can you help me, Shannon? Shannon. And we're going to read it in English, and then we're going to sing it in Hebrew, because it's like a memorable kind of lament. And with that, we're going to finish the session of laments for today, for this Tisha B'Av morning. Okay, let's Zion.
Let Zion and her cities lament like a woman in the pangs of birth, and like a young woman girded with sackcloth, in mourning for the husband of her youth. For the palace that is forsaken through the guilt of her flocks, and for the entry of the blasphemers of God within her innermost sanctuary. For the exile of God's ministers who intone the melody of her hymns, and for the blood that was shed thick as the waters of her rivers. For the resounding music of her dances that are now silenced in her cities, and for the meeting place that is desolate, and the dissolution of her Sanhedrin. For the daily offerings and the ceremonies of the redemption of her firstborn sons, and the desecration of the temple vessels, and for the altars of incense. For the children of her kings, the sons of David, her noble princes, and for their beauty that grew dim when her crowns were removed from her. For the glory of God that departed at the time of the destruction of her mercy seat, and for the oppression of her persecutor, who forced her to make sackcloth her loin coverings. For the wound and rain of blows with which her princes were smitten, and for the dashing against the rocks of her babes and youths. For the rejoicing of her enemies, who laughed at her destruction, and for the affliction of her freeborn sons, so noble and so pure. For the transgression wherewith she perverted her steps from the straight highway, and for the hosts of her assemblies, her swarthy ones and those scorched by the sun. For the voices of those who abused her when her corpses fell thick and fast, and for the tumult of her revilers within the courtyards of her tabernacle. For thy name, O God, that was profaned in the mouth of the enemy that besieged her, and for the supplication wherewith they cry aloud to thee. O listen and hearken to her utterances. Let Zion and her cities lament like a woman in the pangs of her birth, and like a young woman girded in sackcloth and mourning for the husband of her youth.
So as you notice, he repeats the first two lines in the end. There is a story, Rabbi Nachman from Breslev, he taught his pupils by stories in the end. So one of the stories is called Ben HaMelech Uven HaShifcha Shenitchalfu. Translation, the son of the king and the son of the slave that were switched. What happened in his story? It's a story from ancient years. It's like a story that he, with his holiness and secrets, tells his pupils. He tells about the queen and the servant in the palace, and they were both pregnant, and they both give birth in the same day. So they're screaming, giving birth, and the babies are out. Okay, so the mothers, they are now. So they took the babies and put them in the baby's room. So one of the servants there, she said to herself, "What if I switch the babies? And I will give the queen the baby of the son. Let's see what will happen." Kind of that's the story. And she switches the babies. They start to grow up. The baby of the slave, she is behaving like a baby of a slave. And the king. So, and then he said there, then how long can a woman, anybody also, but how long can she keep the secret? I mean, how long? So she told only one person, only her best friend, she told. Next morning, all the palace started to talk. so the son of the queen, which is the slave, honestly, he starts to hear that. So what did he do? He started to be afraid of his place. So he kicks the son of the king to diaspora, he wanted to kill him, wanted to harass him. And the story goes on and on, but the message is known. We are the son of the king. If you want it or not want it, we say, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. Every kiddush we said it. And now look where we are. As if we are switched. And they are looking for us. And this is about us. When we hate each other, when we don't recognize the glory, the diamond in the heart of each other, in the head of each other, we are bringing that on ourselves. It's unbelievable. Just to finish this session, if you don't mind, I'll take some more minutes from you and tell you the story of how the temple was destroyed, according to Gemara. I mean, there are many reasons, and then what happened there that made the ignition of the car of the destruction to start? What's there? So there is a story. I know, I understand. Maybe you read it, maybe not. But it's also, we're repeating it just to understand what happened there. There was a guy in the city of Jerusalem, a rich, nice guy, and he had a good friend. His name was Kamsa. And he had a person also that he didn't like. He hated him. The other guy the name was Bar Kamsa. Again, Kamsa is the one who was one of his best friends, and Bar Kamsa, he hated it, he didn't want to see him. So he sent invitations for his great seuda, like a great meal with drinks and everything. He invites all the rabbis. And also he told his servant to send the invitation, and one of them is Kamsa. And the servant, he made a mistake. So he sent the invitation to Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa doesn't understand what's going on here. But since he invited me, I'm going to go to the feast. He comes feeling like... Bar Kamsa comes to the feast, comes to the seuda, to the meal, and this guy sees him and says, "What are you doing here?" He said, "You invited me. I invited you?" And then he looks to the servant goes, "Mistake." So he said to him, "Go away, you're not invited." So Bar Kamsa says to him, "Since I'm already here, don't embarrass me in front of everybody. Please let me stay, and I will pay for my dinner or my lunch, whatever it was." So I said to him, no, out, you're not gonna eat. So he said, "Please, you're embarrassing me. I'm willing to pay for half of the meal of everybody, half of it. Let me stay, don't embarrass me." He said, "Go away, you're not invited." This Bar Kamsa says to him, "Please, I'm asking you, I will pay for the whole thing, all the budget. Here's a check. Here's my credit card. I'll pay for everything." He took him by his hand and threw him away from the party. This Bar Kamsa was so angry. Why was he angry? Mainly because there were rabbis here in the feast, and they ignored. They just sat there with their tachina, whatever it was, and they ignored it. They said, "Is this the way it's going to be? I'm going to make them until the end." So what did he do? He went to the Roman head, what do you call it? The one that was in rule in Jerusalem in those days, and he said to him, "It's horrible, but this is what happened." He says to him, "The Jewish people want to rebel you. How come? Where did you get this invention from?" He said, "I'm going to prove it to you. You're going to see that they want to rebel you, and they will not accept your offering. You're going to give them your best, one of your best cow, or ox, or a lamb, I don't remember what it was, to offering for them, for you, for the country, and you're going to see that they are not going to do it." So he sent his best, one of his best cattle there for the sacrifice. And this Bar Kamsa, what he do, he damaged the sacrifice. He cut a little bit of the lips of the sacrifice, of the ox. So this is from the emperor, from the Roman thing, and they want to sacrifice, and then they see there is a damage. So they say, how could we sacrifice? It's a damage. We cannot sacrifice according to Torah. We have to sacrifice complete. So most of them said, let's sacrifice it for the sake of the peace of the kingdom, called Shlom Malchut. And one of them said, no, there is Maluch, this is Malchut. The king is there. And no, to make a story short, they didn't sacrifice it. And Bar Kamsa said to him, you see, they didn't, and he destroyed all Jerusalem. All because of a hate for nothing, for a small dinner invitation. Everybody from us, I'm talking to myself too, has those. We want to eliminate all those. Eliminate. If we want to hate, he will give us hate, as we read. If we want peace, if we want to really redeem ourselves, we have to put everything aside. We are only guests here. Everything aside. And we hope, Be'ezrat Hashem, God willing, that we will, all of us, see the building of the third temple in Jerusalem. Amen, amen. Okay. And we continue our davening?
Yeah. Should we continue our davening with Ashrei?
Oh, I just wanted to sing to you this Elitzion, okay?
Yeah.
We sing, it's not gonna, and as you see in this book, that on Mincha Tisha B'Av, which is on page 186, we're going to see that we are going to do the tzitzit and everything. So, okay, 176 Elitzion in Hebrew. Elitzion ve'areha כמו אישה בציריה וכי בתולה חגורת שק על בעל נעוריה עלי ארמון אשר נוטש באשמת צאן עדריה ועל ביאת מחרפי אל בתוך מקדש חדריה עלי גלות משרתי אל נעימי שיר זמריה ועל דמם אשר שופח כמו מימי יאוריה עלי הגיון מחוליה אשר דמם בעריה ועל ועד אשר שמן וביטול סנהדריה עלי זבחי תמידיה ופדיוני וחוריה ועל חילול כלי היכל ומזבח כתוריה עלי טפי מלאכיה בני דוד גביריה ועל יופיים אשר חשך בעצר וכתריה עלי כבוד אשר גלה בעת חורבן דביריה ועל לוחץ אשר לחץ ושם שקים חגוריה עלי מחץ ורוב מכות אשר הוכו נזיריה ועל ניפוץ אלי סלע עול עליה מעריה עלי שמחת משנאיה בשוחקם על שבריה ועל עינוי בני חורים נדיביה טהוריה עלי פשע אשר עבדה סלול דרך אשוריה ועל צבאות קהליה שזופיה שחוריה עלי קולות מחרפיה בעת רבו פגריה ועל רגשת מגדפיה בתוך משכן חצריה עלי שמך אשר חולל בפי קמי מצריה ועל תחן ישבעו לך כשוב ושמע אמריה, והיא ציון ועריה, כמו אישה וצעיריה, וכי בתולה חגורתה על בעל נעוריה.
Return to our Sidur, page 171, in Ashrei.
אשרי זדק יכול להיות. חי להם.
Do not say the second paragraph on page
טוב, אז
173.
תהילת אדוני ידבר פי ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד. ואנחנו נברך יח מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה.
Page 175.
ובא לציון גואס. Pay attention, on Tisha B'Av we are eliminating the stanza with ואתה קדוש. ובא לציון גואל של יפה ביעקב, ואתה קדוש יושב תהיו ישראל. קדוש, 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 כל הארץ כבודו. ותישאני רוח, אשמע אחרי קורנש גדול, ברוך כבוד אדוני מקומו. אדוני אימו יכול לעם ועד. אדוני לא אברהם יצחק וישראל אותם. אחד צדק לעולם אותם. ברוך הוא אלוהינו שבראנו לכבודו והבדילנו מן הטועים ונתן לנו תורת אמת. ויפתחו בחיות שמך כי לא עזבת דורשך אדוני, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה ויאדיר.
Page 181, Aleinu.
Just to say to you that if we would say a Kaddish, there is a section that is called Titkabal on 179, may it be accepted. This is eliminated on Tisha B'Av as the Prophet says that God will not accept our prayer. So we eliminate that and we will say it in Mincha. But right now we don't have a minyan, so we just think about it, of course in our heart. Aleinu, we're going to recite it, no singing. Aleinu לשבח, לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית. שלא עשנו כרואי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונה, שהם משתחווים להבל בריק ומתפללים אל יושיע. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים, שנת עוזו בגבהם מרומים. הוא אלוהינו, אין עוד, אמת מלכנו, אפס זולתו. וכתוב בתורתו וידעת וישבת אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. We have an opportunity here to read it in English, the second paragraph. Therefore, we place our hope in you, Lord our God. Everybody, that we may soon see the glory of your power when you will remove abomination from the earth and the idols
will be utterly destroyed, and the world will be perfected on the sovereignty of the Almighty, and all humanity will call on your name.
Return the
All
earth.
the earth will look towards you.
All the world's inhabitants will realize and know
that to you every knee must bow and every tongue swear loyalty. Before you, Lord our God, they will kneel and bow down to give honor to your glorious name. They will
for they will all accept the
yoke
yoke.
of your kingdom, and you will reign over them soon and forever. For the kingdom is yours, and to all eternity you will reign in glory. As it is written in your Torah, the Lord will reign forever and ever. And it is said, then the Lord shall be king over all the earth. And on that day, the Lord shall be one, his name one.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Mourner's Kaddish, for those in mourning and observing Yortzeit, Mourner's Kaddish, page 183. Yet Kedal, Yet Kedash, Shemei Rabbah, V'amat Yifrach Kirute, V'yamim V'lachute, V'chayechon, V'yamechon, V'chayech Kol Beit Yisrael, V'agalav, V'ktarvim, V'yameh, Yehesh Mei Rabba V'vorach, V'yamah Mei Yomaya, Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitbarar, Yitramach, Yitnaseh, Yitadar, Yitalev, Yitalal, Shemei, Yishal, Yikru, Ve'ela, Minko, V'yatan, Shiratan, Tishmatan, V'nechamatan, V'amiran, V'yamah, V'yameh, Yehesh Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, V'yachol Yisrael, V'yimru Ameh, Oiseh Shalom V'yimrama, Kud Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'yachol Yisrael, V'yimru Ameh.
We are going to postpone, not omit, but postpone the psalm for Sunday, as written here in the Luach, because it's a psalm that they used to sing in the Beit HaMikdash, and now there is no Beit HaMikdash, so we're going to postpone it to afternoon Mincha service. We're going to say that. We're going to wear out tefillin and talit if you can be here, and to complete this holy day. Thank you very much for being with us. And as I said, we don't greet each other for hello and goodbye in this day as if we are mourners. And from the middle of this holy day, the morning kind of restrictions will be less. People will start to fix the house a little bit, to be in consolation, you say, in comfort,
Yeah.
and we are going to put feeling in the afternoon, and start to come back to a real kind of routine.
So our services this evening will be at 6 p.m. If we have a minyan, we will be reading from the Torah, and there will also be a Haftorah. So you can get a minyan for 6 o'clock.
Breakfast upstairs.
Breakfast upstairs tomorrow.
Tomorrow breakfast.
It's good.